Pretend the child is an alien who does not understand humans. Sometimes this is a very helpful metaphor. Hello, welcome to the Chirp YouTube channel. My name is Christy and I am your friendly online speech-language pathologist and specialist in children's communication development, which includes behavior, because behavior is one type of communication. In this series that I've been doing, you can find the rest of it right there. I have been discussing simple strategies for improving interaction, for helping a child that you might be supporting to interact better with the world and to learn those skills for being a better communicator. These things are very important when we're working with kids or when we have a child in our family who is developing a little bit differently. We want to make sure that we are doing what we can to teach those skills. And we want to do it in ways that seem simple, because we don't need more hard things in our lives. We really don't. We have enough. We want to make it fun. We want to make it playful. We want to make it easy. That is what I'm hoping this series can accomplish. Simple strategies. And I am going through some of the strategies that are mentioned in this wonderful book, Floor Time Strategies, and which is linked in the box below this, by the way. I recommend that you buy it. It has lots and lots and lots of more details. I am just picking a few strategies from this book and going into more detail on them than they are able to do in the book, because I have a little more time to talk. And they just have a page or two on each strategy, and they're very quick reads. So that is a good thing. I wanted to expand upon this because I think it's such a great idea to have simple little snippets that we can use. And I realize that maybe my videos, maybe you don't consider them snippets because they're not a 1-minute video. I cannot condense all of this knowledge into a 1-minute video. I just can't do it. So you will have to put up with the long form videos. So sorry. But there are good things about that. You can learn a little bit more in a 15-minute video than you can in a 1-minute video. Today, we're going to talk about behavior, and the next few videos in this series are going to be about behavior, challenging behavior specifically. This is pretty much the biggest issue that we face with children, period, is behavior that we don't like, or that is dangerous, or that somehow is inappropriate. It's very challenging. I still deal with this all the time, trying to figure out what's going on. My point in this video is that we need to be behavior investigators. We need to look at a behavior as a way of communicating, as if it is communicating something, because it is. It's not just an action we want to eliminate. It is a communication that we need to interpret and respond to. Pretend the child is an alien who does not understand humans. Sometimes this is a very helpful metaphor. If this alien does not understand humans, how would this alien communicate if the room is too loud? If other children are too close? If he has to go to the bathroom or his tummy hurts? Maybe this alien would communicate these things by pulling my hair or pinching my face. Maybe. Our job in the realm of behavior interpretation is to notice all of the variables and assess what might be going on. Think of a behavior in your mind that maybe a child in your life is doing right now. I'm thinking of one, and in fact, I will tell you what it is. I have a child. I'm working in a large group environment, a mixed environment. So I have a little group of kids who have diagnoses or different developmental needs. And then there's the larger group environment, which is filled with mostly typically developing kids. They still may have some quirks, but they are within the range of typical. The kids in my group are not within the range of typical for one reason or another. They have various different needs. They're not all the same. The one child I'm thinking of, the behavior I'm going to think of today and talk about today is that he does little aggressive behaviors, like pinching, pulling my hair, which I admit is always in the way, or trying to scratch our faces, or mostly those things. The pinching is the worst because that can become very painful and sudden. He also bites. He's not super into any of these behaviors, if you know what I mean. I've dealt with a lot of aggression throughout my career, a lot of it. And some kids are really into it really quickly. They will, out of nowhere, or so it feels, it's almost never completely out of nowhere. We must keep this in mind. But it feels as if it's out of nowhere that the kid will just reach up and scratch your face off. And it's clear that it is meant, that this child means to scratch you and means it to mean something. In this case, or pulls your hair, but actually pulls out a clump of it. It's not just tugs on it like this. Okay. I have dealt with that, and this is not that. This is more of a, that would be a pinch. It feels like a communication rather than an offensive attack. And so, that is one point of information. When this child pinches my face or pulls my hair, what has just happened? We call that the antecedent. What comes right before this behavior? In this case, usually the child has been required to be still for a certain amount of time. I'm not a fan of requiring children to be still, by the way. I'm working within someone else's environment, and I am trying to manage behaviors that I would manage differently if I were in a self-contained, separate environment. Just so you know that. I don't think children should be sitting still. I think children should be able to wander. But this particular program is in a larger room with access to the outdoors and a parking lot, to be specific. So I cannot let this child wander. Even if he needs to move, he needs to be accompanied and held onto because the parking lot is a dangerous attraction. Okay. Before the behavior occurs, what happened right before? Right before the child you're thinking of hits you, did you just use a very loud voice right in his ear? Did you require him to do something that's really difficult for him? Did the fire alarm just go off? Is he feeling really tired that day? Usually when you're tired, you don't have enough energy to hit people, but sometimes that's what comes out. Sometimes the way you communicate, get off me and let me sleep, is with a whack. That was a very wimpy whap, but I don't want to hit the camera. So we've discussed the antecedent. It's very good to keep a chart of this. I'll put some links down below, but there are many charts where you can chart behavior. If you're working in a classroom, the teacher you're working with, or you yourself as the teacher, should have access to lots of behavior planning materials, but it helps to just kind of think this through from a casual perspective also, even if you don't particularly want to chart it. Although I think it's a good idea because then we can easily see what comes first, the behavior itself, and then we're going to talk about the consequence to the behavior. What is it that happens afterward? And here I'm going to tell you a story that I have told many times on this channel, but who knows, maybe you weren't here for one of those videos. This is a story about, I worked with a pair of twin boys. They were 3 at the time I started working with them, And I think they had a diagnosis. They did not have a diagnosis at this time when I met them. And I think the only diagnosis they received at the time, this was maybe 20 years ago, I think the diagnosis they received at the time was a pervasive developmental disorder, which was kind of a precursor to maybe these kids might have an autism spectrum disorder, but we're not quite sure yet. In some way, they're not developing like other kids, so we're going to keep an eye on it and we're going to give them lots of services. And so that's what was happening with these kids. They did have communication disorders, but their main difficulty was behavioral. They were out of control. They were very aggressive. They refused to follow any directions ever. Okay, that's not true. They usually would not do what you expected that they would do or what would keep them and other people safe. You could not guarantee that if you said, wait a minute, don't cross the road, that they wouldn't just run across. And you can guarantee that if they had to do anything that was difficult for them, that they would not do it. And one of my missions was to go into their home and try to figure out the dynamic. What was going on when these behaviors were occurring, when they were aggressive toward mom and dad? What was the antecedent to that behavior? And then what happened afterward? What I discovered was that their behavior outbursts, their aggression, got them out of doing a lot of hard things. In this case, this is not always the case. In their case, it was very logical that they would have these behaviors because when they did, they got a time out. Let me give you an example of why this might not be a great plan. I'm not a fan of timeouts. I am a fan of time away to calm down when kids are having a sensory overwhelm, when they are having a meltdown. Obviously, please watch this video on meltdowns. It's a very important one. And of course, we need time to calm down when we are overwhelmed or out of our noggins for some reason. But when we are doing a behavior specifically to get out of something, a time away is not necessarily the best plan. Here's an example, and this actually occurred. One of the first weeks that I was in their home, I might have gone twice a week to this family, but one of the first times I was in their home, I was watching a behavior play out between the boys and their mom. What happened was the mom said, we're gonna clean up toys. The little boys were still using sippy cups, and one of them threw, maybe they both did, I can't remember, threw the sippy cup at the kitchen island, and it broke open, and the drink went all over the wall, all over the island, all over the floor. And Mom said, that's it, go sit on the stairs, and you are in time out. Mom clearly thought that this was a really good punishment, and that this would stop that behavior forever in the future. What I saw was that she had just rewarded that behavior. She had rewarded that outburst by allowing them to not clean up, which was the original request, and then they also got out of cleaning up the mess that they had made. So unfortunately, I, as the specialist, had to say, oh no, they don't get to go sit on the steps while you clean that up. They need to clean it up. And so they were screaming and crying, and we were helping them clean it up with the rag. They didn't have to clean up the whole thing. Obviously, they're 3 years old. But they did have to help. They had the cognitive ability and the physical ability to help clean up the mess that they made. And the mess that they made was simply because they didn't want anything to do with picking up toys. And then after we cleaned that up, we had to go pick up the toys too. And that was a hand over hand. I pick up the block with my hand and your hand, and we put it in the box. And they're screaming the whole time. We're not harming them in any way. They were simply mad. And this is the case in many occurrences of timeout. It is an escape from having to do something that children don't want to do. It's a rest period while someone else has to do your hard work for you. This is why it's very important to pay attention to what comes before the behavior and then what comes after the behavior. We need to know what is the logical reasoning that the child's brain is going through? Even if the child is unaware of this reasoning, our brains are pretty smart, and they will help us to get out of doing things we don't want to do. They will help us to create patterns that work better for us. And usually those patterns are to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. In fact, read the book The Pleasure Trap if you haven't, because it's a very good summary of that principle of biology. All living creatures want to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And we will go to our brains, our bodies are built on those three motivators. Kids as well, even if they don't know it, because they are biological entities. So these little boys were doing those three things. They were seeking the pleasure of escaping from a difficult task. They were avoiding the pain of cleaning up the mess or cleaning up the toys. And they were conserving energy. If they didn't have to do any of it and someone else would do it, great. They win. And on a biological level, they were winning. And their parents didn't see it because all they were seeing was their kids were just doing random behaviors, and they didn't understand why. Why would their kids keep doing this? Why wouldn't their kids just clean up the toys? And so we had to work through some tears and some anger from those boys when we followed through with, no, we're still going to clean up the toys. And even if you throw your drink, that's not going to get you out of it. We're still going to have to clean up the toys. Once again, we were not mean about this. We were not violent. We were calm. We stayed calm the whole time, even as they were showing us their displeasure. And that's okay. These little boys, actually, I didn't keep in close contact with them after I stopped seeing them, but one of my friends did, and she said that they are completely typical. Their behavior is typical. They're kind. They're thoughtful. With appropriate treatment, they grew out of these behavior challenges, and I'm so proud of them. They were super cute. Their family was very invested, and I'm very proud of them. In the case of my little kid that I am talking about today, I'm talking about lots of kids today, a whole realm of kids that I have been able to learn from. The one I'm talking about in my current program, usually when he starts pinching, it's because he's having sensory needs. And I discovered this because he begins by threatening to bite or by pinching. Pinching gives you a lot of feedback to your body. It really does. It gives you feedback to the fingers and the muscles as you squeeze. Pulling hair is the same way. It's very resistant. And it also communicates something is going on in my body and I don't know how to handle it. And so we have a couple of things we do when this child is beginning to get pinchy or yanky. First, I give him a chewy. They look like this or like this. There are a variety of different ones. His favorite one is the one that looks like a pea. You can hold it and you can really bite hard. You can bite on just the stick end, or you can, if you need more input, you can bite on the roundy end, because then you can bite in the front and the back at the same time, and that gives you a lot of really good pressure. Read more about proprioceptive input right here, because that is what he is seeking. He's seeking proprioceptive input. And I know this because he does these beforehand. What I've noticed is his tell is that he starts making whiny noises. And he starts kind of getting a little fidgety and weird, and he starts trying to push up against people because he is seeking this kind of pressure. And then he starts to pinch and pull hair and bite. We give him a chewy. We make sure he always has one throughout our session now. And also, I have bought a weighted vest for him. I just bought it this last week, and I'm excited to try it. I think it's going to work great. Also, the one I got is super cute because it was pre-owned and the family that owned it sewed superhero patches all over it. So I'm really excited because it's going to be cute as well as functional. And this is what we do when we notice those antecedent behaviors or those antecedent situations are coming up. For example, when it's going to be a cleanup time, we talk those little boys down right away. We say, don't worry, we'll set the timer, 2 minutes, we'll be all done cleaning up, and then we can do something really fun. We set the stage for something better that's going to come after the cleaning up so that the cleaning up doesn't seem quite so bad. With my little boy who pinches and bites, we notice when he's getting worked up. The antecedents are, we see it. We don't know exactly why they're happening at this point, probably because of the time span that he has been in a loud environment, partially probably because he is needing to walk a lot more, and sometimes we just can't walk him as much as he needs to walk. But when we notice he is exhibiting ramping up symptoms, we provide what he needs earlier so that we don't need to see that behavior. And that's the goal. The goal is that we can avoid the behavior, and therefore the child hasn't had to get to that point where they display that behavior, because we have investigated successfully. We understood what the child was communicating with that behavior. My child who pinches, he was communicating, I have sensory needs and I don't know how to meet them. And he doesn't communicate using any method that we understand so far. We're working on that, but we don't have he hasn't consistently figured out yet our visual systems. He's nonverbal. We're still working on that. But sensory input is going to be on the list, I imagine, when he does communicate effectively. Our little twins, one of the reasons they probably freak out with cleaning up is because it seems overwhelming to them. A little tiny kid, and at the time, their parents were letting them dump all the toys out, and that seems very overwhelming to have to put piles and piles of toys away. But if we said, don't worry, we're all working together, Mom and Christy and you, we can all work very quickly. It will be very fast, and then we will do something really fun. When we have a calm voice about it, it really was not a problem anymore. And that's the kind of investigating that we need to do about behavior. We cannot stamp out behaviors because behaviors are a type of communication. We need to understand what the behaviors are communicating and respond to that message that the child is sending. And then perhaps unwanted or dangerous behaviors will not be necessary because we understood what the child was trying to communicate. Okay, go forth and analyze and investigate and assess and do what you can to make unwanted behaviors unnecessary. Thank you for being here. Don't forget, if you feel like it, you could subscribe, you could give me a thumbs up, you could check out the CHIRP curriculum, which I have linked down below, which is for families and churches. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. See you soon. Bye.